So thank you, Diana, for coming today. I'm just so thrilled you made it to our broadcast here.
Hi, Michelle. I'm so happy to be here.
We're so thrilled you're here, too. It's just a real treat. So let's start our conversation about dialogue about controversial issues. Tell us a little bit. What is it and why is it so important?
Well, civil dialogue in the classroom involves discussion and deliberations among students about what we call open questions. These are important questions for which there are multiple and competing answers. And in a high-quality civil dialogue, you'll see students who are well prepared to discuss, so they quite literally know what they're talking about. You'll see students who have good discussion skills, so they know, for example, how to make a point with evidence and arguments. They know how to ask questions of their classmates. And you'll see teachers who are facilitating in a way to ensure that all the students in class have an opportunity to participate. So why are they important? Well, I think 3 reasons. One is that we want to teach students important content about the political issues of the day. And we know that when they are in discussion about that content, they're much more likely to learn it. Second, we know that in contemporary American society, there are a lot of disagreements about what we call controversial political issues. So think for a moment about a discussion about whether or not the federal minimum wage should be raised, or a discussion about whether we should have stricter gun control laws. Those are both controversial political issues. And we know that people can have highly reasoned, highly warranted, differing answers to those questions. And we want to make sure that students become part of that contemporary debate that we have in society. So we teach them about this in school.
And we know these are the kinds of issues young people want to talk about. They need a place and a forum on where to go and how to have that conversation, so they're prepared to engage in those conversations as engaged citizens.
Absolutely. People often say that young people don't want to be involved in the political system. That's in fact not true. Young people do want to be involved in the political system, but they recognize that in order to be involved, they need to know about the issues of the day, and they need to form their own opinions, not to adopt someone else's opinions, but to form their own opinions. And we know that students who know more about the issues of the day, who have more experience discussing those issues in class, are much more likely to civically participate in society, both while they're in school and after they graduate.
And, you know, as we've heard from Ted McConnell and others, the classroom is the perfect setting to engage in those activities and develop those skills to have those kinds of conversations.
Absolutely, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is classes are places where you've got students with many differing points of view and students who are really quite different from one another in a variety of ways. And difference is the mother's milk of deliberation. We want people to have differing points of view. We don't want to teach people how to talk only with people who already agree with them. So in most classrooms, there's a higher degree of political diversity than in virtually any other place where students would learn how to talk about such issues. We also have teachers who either have the skills or could develop the skills to teach students how to participate in these discussions in a high-quality way.
Yeah, terrific. So paint a picture for us. When you walk into a classroom, when you did this yourself as a teacher, what does it look like in a classroom? Because it's different than just throwing out a topic and having a free-for-all.
So in a classroom where you see high-quality discussion, you'd expect to find students who have done a lot of preparation in advance. And we want students to be prepared because then they're much more likely to participate and they're much more likely to learn more. You would see teachers who are facilitating in a really sophisticated way, and they're doing that in order to make sure that students are addressing really hard and important questions, and also to make sure that lots of students participate. We'll see students who are talking with one another, not just mediated through the teacher. And finally, we'll see highly civil dialogue. We'll see students who treat one another with respect, students who understand that it's fine to disagree. As a matter of fact, in American democracy, we want people to disagree. What we don't want is combative discussion that causes students to feel like they're not being respected and then causes them to think that they shouldn't participate.
And what I'm hearing you say, and what we know is true, is this takes a lot of good preparation from the teacher in advance, preparing the students, preparing the ground rules. Talk a little about that.
Absolutely. So teachers who are good at this know a lot about what constitutes high-quality discussion and deliberation. So they actually know what they're aiming for. They also know that there's lots of methods or models of discussion, like some of those that you mentioned in the introduction, structured academic controversy or Socratic seminars. They know that some of those models are better with some questions than with others. They know what kind of materials are good for students to be exposed to so they're prepared for discussion. And they know how to teach students the skills that they need to participate effectively.
And it really is a skill set from the teacher too. We've done a lot of professional development and it takes practice. It's easy to feel discouraged. You try it the first time, things don't quite go the right way. Takes some practice on the teacher's end too, doesn't it?
It does take some practice. What we know from our research is that the teachers who are really good at this have been hard at work learning it often for a number of years. That it's rare for somebody to come into the classroom as a novice teacher and be a really good discussion teacher. Typically, teachers get better through practice, through feedback, and through high-quality professional development, like what you've been doing here for so many years in California.
Yeah, and it over and over. Just like anything we teach, it never is quite the same each time. You learn from it, you get stronger at it the more you practice it yourself with kids. And I imagine it might look and feel a little different classrooms, different sets of kids. Talk a little bit about what do we do with kids who are shy, who aren't comfortable speaking out, who might be English learners. How do we, because we tend to be very sympathetic to that and give them permission to kind of sit out some of this. So what would be your recommendations around that?
Well, my recommendation is that we have to treat discussion skills just like we treat writing or math. We would never say, oh, you don't need to learn how to write or you don't need to learn how to do math. Yeah. Those are essential things that we need. So too are discussion skills. So teachers who are sophisticated at doing this recognize that they want all students to participate, but that they have to set up norms in the classroom that make students feel comfortable enough that they're willing to participate. Oftentimes, for example, they'll start with students having discussions in pairs and then in small groups before they get to a large group, because that tends to be a lot more intimidating. Students who are English language learners need discussion. As a matter of fact, we know from the research that discussion is just critical to forming language skills. But those students also need to be treated with a lot of respect and need to be helped and scaffolded into the discussion skills that they need to develop.
Yeah, great points. And there's a lot of conversation in California about implementing Common Core, and this fits beautifully in there, this idea of speaking and listening carefully, using academic language, drawing on evidence to convey ideas. All of that is engaged in this, and great opportunity, I think, for students and for teachers to practice this.
Absolutely. And I think what's important is to think about two things. We want to teach with discussion. And what that means is we want students to participate in high-quality discussions so they learn more content, so they develop deep conceptual understanding, and most importantly, so they realize that people can have differing points of view and still be really good people. But we also want to teach for discussion, which means that at the end of the day, we quite literally want students to be better discussants than they would be without these opportunities. So we want students, as you said, to know how to listen well and carefully. We want students to be able to ask good questions that are oftentimes kind of hard-hitting questions, but ask in a way that causes people to want to participate. We want students to have answers to questions that are full of evidence and full of warrants for their claims. We don't just want blather.
Well, and so the obvious benefit, boy, if the whole next generation learned how to engage in these kind of intelligent, respectful dialogues, wouldn't our democracy have so much more integrity, it seems? That's a real benefit.
You know, this is a real problem because when we turn on the television, we often see examples of uncivil dialogue. We see people who are quite literally insulting one another. They're shouting sometimes at one another. They're not listening very carefully. That's not what we want. What we want is for the next generation to have better skills than, quite frankly, we see in the society around us now.
Yeah, a lot of teachers will say there's not as many role models for that as perhaps in the past that we've seen. Challenges. This can be kind of intimidating and challenging for teachers. What have you seen as some of the challenges, and how are teachers addressing some of that?
Well, one challenge is that students come into the classroom not already having these skills. And so teachers need to be aware of that, and they can't demand that students have skills that they haven't been taught. So teaching students the skills they need is a challenge. Mm-hmm. A second challenge is making sure that students are well prepared. The single most important thing we found from our research is that when students are well prepared for classroom discussion, they're more likely to participate. They're especially more likely to participate if they're not the kind of kid who always participates. So preparation is just critical. A third challenge often is how do we make sure that we're giving students meaningful feedback on whether or not they're developing these skills?
That's a skill too, how to give good critical feedback that's going to help
Absolutely.
them in the future. We know a lot of teachers engage in debate clubs, those are really powerful exercises. Talk a little bit about debate and how is it like this or not like this, and what do you see as benefits there?
Well, so I am a big fan of debate, and sometimes people will say, well, because you research discussion and deliberation, it must mean that you don't support debate. And that's not at all the truth. As a matter of fact, my father was a college debate coach, and my sister was a really famous college debater. So I grew up in a
you better
family
not say anything bad about debate.
with a lot of debate. And I think debate's great for kids. It is different from what we do in discussion and deliberation. And it's different in a couple of core ways. In a discussion, you would expect to see students asking more questions of one another. You would expect to see students talking with one another in order to build understanding, as opposed to often in debate, we see students who either have or have been assigned a point of view, and what they're trying to do is convince the other person that they're right. In high-quality discussion and deliberation, there is persuasion, to be sure, but there's a lot more inquiry than we often see in traditional debate.
Yeah, and I see it sort of as you're seeking to gather information, to learn, to investigate, get an idea of the total picture before you're even making a position or setting up forth an opinion on something.
Although in most high-quality discussion and deliberation, you'll hear students voicing their opinions. Opinions are important. We want them to have opinions, but we want students to not only understand their own opinion, but understand the views of others. We want them to respect the idea that we can have differing points of view and still be people who, should be treated equally and well. So what we're really trying to do in discussion and deliberation is cause students to understand that in contemporary democracy, people disagree. Disagreement is fine. We need disagreement in order to build a better democracy. But we want to treat people with respect, even people who disagree with our own views. And that we know can be taught in school. It's being taught in schools across California and across the nation. And I think it's really critical. Before you ask me, why is this so important? I would say it's so important because we want this next generation to do a better job with this democracy than, quite frankly, we've done.
I think you're so right on so many levels, and it's because of your great work. We all look and aspire to you for the wonderful work you've done, not only in research, but making this practical, doable, available for teachers across California and across the nation. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts that we can capture and share with everyone else, and all the other great work that you're doing.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I'm a big fan of, as you know, of the Democracy Schools Project, and I think this is my 4th time here in California working with teachers in the last several years. And it's really fun. It's really fun for me to listen to teachers talk about both their challenges, but it's also fun to listen to them talk, like we heard this morning, about how just incredibly enervating it is as a teacher to be in a classroom where students are participating in high quality public talk.
Yes, yes. And just to let all our viewers know, Dr. Hess was one of the founders and helped us create the Democracy School Initiative, and so you've always been an inspiration to me and so many others. So again, thank you for joining us and informing us and enlightening and making our work all the richer.
Well, thank you. It's been great to be here.